that robot voice. So just to let you know, I really do welcome questions. Now's an opportunity. I don't always have time to actually speak to different people. I think the easiest is to either put your hands up or send a chat. Just if, I don't know, someone could manage the chat because it's quite hard to navigate. Okay, perfect. That's great. So the idea today is we're going to be talking about AI, but I have to give you some context, right? I know AI sounds amazing, but you almost have to be a digital twin with AI. And this is such an important concept because AI becomes your partner, not so much your, let's say, is just going to spit out information. So you have to rethink of AI, not as a tool that you've had before, like, let's say you've used a CRM program and then you're working. AI has actually been constructed completely differently. Now, what we have with business analysis, and I'm going to talk about business architecture too, is when we're analyzing things like requirements, documents, these are all words, right? And so as we understand what the words are, AI can help us use the words and respond to the words. So it really likes to understand your language, what you're saying, which is quite different from what you're doing. And so that's one key aspect just to consider. You got to think of it as talking to somebody and explaining some stuff in a way that's cohesive, rather than like if you're going to go order from a coffee shop, and we're going to use the case of Supreme Coffee. If you're going to go and order from a coffee shop, you'll have to explain kind of what you're looking for and how you want that, and you're going to have to use your words, right? And that's exactly what you're doing with AI. And so what we call prompt engineering is really important to be able to give it a good prompt so you get a good output. So that's a quick start, but so I'm going to give you a little bit of background, and don't worry, I'm going to show you how it works too. Just in terms of myself, almost 7 years now with Agora. The reason why I started it actually is probably more interesting than not. I've been working in projects both in BArch and BA roles, and I just kind of went all these projects and these challenges and the pain points that you have and the politics and trying to get everything together. And then you have people with different levels of training, different levels of understanding and experience. And so I just naturally ended up having to train people. It wasn't something I volunteered for, but then I was like, oh, maybe this is my superpower and I should just use it. And so it certainly wasn't something that I immediately kind of decided to do. I had been working for a training company for many years, but I've always been super interested in technology. And so now with the bridge of training bots, and I like to call myself mother of bots, training bots and training people has really... Sorry, someone asked a question?
No, it was an accident. Sorry.
Okay. All right. So yeah, we have about, we work with BAs and BArchs in about 96 countries. And we have over 11,000 learners. So yeah, we're busy and get a little tired. And yeah, sometimes I have to try keep up. I try engage as much as I possibly can, but there are quite a few people, and obviously learners like Jenny get some level of priority in terms of conversation, but it's also good to get the message out there. So what is the role of the business analyst versus the business architect is one of the topics we're going to discuss. And it's very important in the AI context. Remember, we're having conversations with AI. What do business analysts do? Super light, my version. as well as what do business architects do, and then we'll look at how to effectively use AI for requirements. And obviously there's questions and answers if you're keen on that. So business analysis day is coming up, BA Day, 1st of November. This is what was posted last year, and I really liked it. A BA is someone who does precision guesswork based on unreliable data provided by those with questionable knowledge. So I think it's a good segue into much of what we're going to be discussing. And Daniel Lambert, a close friend and colleague, even though he's in Canada, he said, sounds less accurate if a decent architecture practice was in place to assist business analysts with the description of requirements, epics, and user stories. And so we're going to look at that interaction. And yeah, this was actually a really funny post. Hopefully they're going to do a few funnies. And I'm sure my team, Laura does a lot of the content. We'll also be looking at some things for BA Day this year. All right, business analysts. So what do? We deep dive. I always use the term investigative journalist. A good BA really understands how to understand the root cause of things. What's the problem that we're dealing with? What is the change that we're looking at? So in this context, I'm just saying we'll go deep dive into understanding why we're having challenges, review some information, and understand what is going on. And I'll refer to Babak too, so don't worry. But loosely, we are investigative journalists, and we're looking at information, and we're looking at transferring that information, those insights and that knowledge back to the business in the form of requirements so that they understand what they need to do. And just like somebody who is doing research on what's going on here, we'll have to give some feedback and say, okay, to fix this, we might need to look at these aspects. I also want to remind you that business analysts also are designers. We talk about requirements and design, such as processes. Business architecture, on the other side, looks at the ecosystem of your business. And so you can imagine if you're working in multiple different projects, it can be a little bit of a pain because what one BA is doing here and the other one's doing here might affect the whole system. And so really understanding how that works is super important because we have to understand the ecosystem of the business. And so when you're doing AI, you can get requirements today from ChatGPT, but there's no context. And the challenge with that is that it's kind of like shortcutting some of the processes. So remember, AI is really smart and it can respond to what you're asking it, but it also needs context. In the Babak guide, we talk about BACM, which is the core concepts model, and that is understanding the need, understanding the change, understanding the solution, understanding the context, the value, and the stakeholders. And so when you work with AI, you also want to be able to understand that. So generating requirements without context is going to be difficult. So business analysts work at the depth of an organization, analyze. I always say, and BAs forget that they're analysts, and they are doing documents and filling out forms and doing all of that. But actually, you're brought in to analyze. And what are you analyzing? You're analyzing data and information. And then for the business, by the way, not for not for the tech team, for the business. And then business architects are looking at the breadth, understanding how all of that information and data is being managed and linked. So I typically say, by the way, all businesses have architecture. Not all businesses have been architected, just like all houses have a house that has architecture in it, but not all houses have been architected. And we know that because in New Zealand, you can find some munted houses, which Bob and his brother were built, and then you've also got really well-designed houses, and you know that there was an architect involved in that. I also like to just explain the difference between digitization, which is taking a piece of paper and put it into a PDF as an example, digital enhancement, which is taking a process and automating, improving, speeding it up. Again, you need to think of the AI context. And then looking at digital transformation, which most businesses don't do, which is changing the operating model. All right. So here you use an example of Uber versus the taxi. Uber changed the operating model, which is called digital transformation, using digitization. So AI needs the right words to understand what you're asking it to do. And it has its own character and its own way of displaying things. And then we look at what businesses actually look like. Nasty. So it's not an easy topic to understand. And what architects try to do is simplify the visualization, the data components. And so what we do is we create conceptual models. Now, I always say to people, when an architect designs your house on a piece of paper, it's not a house, right? It's a picture of a house, and it's not real. It's not an actual house. It's just a picture. And so just as when you do requirements, it's not real. It's a requirement that's written in a particular way. So when we design our business, we design a picture of our business. We design how the business should function. But often what happens with both business analysts and architects and several other players is this inability to distinguish between conceptual designs and modeling and physical systems that we're using. And often what happens is we're trying to figure out the system and how the system works. And that is important, don't get me wrong, but we need to understand what the business wants. So you've got to think of the architect who's designing the house. What does the client want in order to design that house? How do we simplify that? How do we adjust that? And so often what we're doing is we're working in this, and they go, okay, you have to update system X, which is not really where you want to go. But I'm not saying it's not worth it. Don't get me wrong. I'm just saying, you have to understand context and concepts really well to understand how you're rationalizing the change in your organization, not just the systems that require change. So from a business analyst to a business architect, you're looking at, the architect looks at the knowledge base, the library of all the information that we want to capture around our business, cataloged and categorized and simplified, that can be designed into this structure. And the business analyst looks at a knowledge brief. And the knowledge brief, quite simply, is understanding certain aspects of the business and getting the right information and insight into the business. We're nearly there on the AI. Nearly. But I hope you understand so far what I'm trying to explain in terms of your ecosystem and what it's about. So when you look at architecture, we look at the macro level, we look at understanding what you're doing overall. So think of that bird's eye view. When we look at the strategy level, and for those who've done the AAC certification, we talk about the strategy horizon, the initiative horizon, and the delivery horizon. When we look at the strategy level, here we want to understand what is changing in the environment, the ecosystem of our business. When we look at a program level, we look at several things, or initiative level, we look at several things that would have to be adjusted to have a program. And then we look at the project level and the specific requirements that would be needed. So when I spoke about creating requirements using ChatGPT, often what happens is people are working here and creating a whole bunch of requirements, but these steps are missing. And this means that what you're creating here could be complete fiction, or it could be helpful. I'm not saying that your AI isn't really good. It is, and it can reason certain things, but understanding how to build value to the business means that you have to understand the layers of data or information that you've got to acquire over time. All right, so that's a brief introduction into understanding our ecosystem, what is our business about, and what do we do. So we are essentially conduits of information. We are taking information from the data level and converting that into some form of information that the business can use and ensuring we provide the knowledge, which is very similar to what AI does, right? It takes data, it converts it into a form of information and provides insights into what you're doing. So when working with AI, and we're going to talk specifically about, and I'm not excluding BAs when I talk about architecture, but I'm referring to the structures, the ecosystem that I discussed earlier. But when we talk about AI also needs to understand certain things. So it requires context. What business is this? Why are we doing this, etc. It needs to understand its own role. Like I said, you have to think of it as a digital twin. What is it trying to do and achieve? It needs to understand the principles of business architecture, because remember, that's the ecosystem that's driving the requirements. It needs to understand structured outputs. So in other words, it's not going to give you different documents and results every single time. It needs to understand things like traceability that we talk about. So a user story shouldn't be repeated unnecessarily in a completely different context. And then it needs to create containers for requirements. So it needs to batch the data. So you can investigate it. You can be that investigative journalist on batching. And then it needs good inputs or prompts to frame the architecture well. All right, so let's look at it working. So this video is 8 minutes, and I'll talk you through the whole thing. And we are going to go right through to requirements. So at our echo level, I've got the case study of Supreme Coffee. That is a small New Zealand coffee shop wanting to franchise globally. It's all made up. So, but I did check. There's no Supreme Coffee. There is Coffee Supreme, but no Supreme Coffee that I could find. So I try to use that. And what they're trying to do first is to redo their brand in their organization. So I have uploaded the knowledge base. Remember, that is the library of business architecture into this. And I have asked it to create a set of data points called a requirements container. And it needs to create that. So let's get started. Okay, so here it's created a unique ID for the requirements. And this, you can think of a requirement at the business level as a business requirement. So these would be, it's not quite, but just go with me. It's drawing from the library, and it's pulling a set of data concepts that need to be reviewed. It does a really good job. And I know when you first look at this, you're going to go, what the hell? But it lists the kind of stakeholders and that. So we use capabilities in our business architecture, and it draws a set of information. And I've said, now create 20 user stories based on this data set that I have. And there you go. Clever bot. As a brand manager, I want to have brand guidelines. So it's done it all by itself. But it's used the knowledge base in which to do that. And so I really like that. And I was like, oh, okay, that's looking good. It's bringing in the stakeholders that are discussed. It's looking at different business objects. And then I said create acceptance criteria for the first requirement, or first user story. And then it created a whole set of acceptance criteria, which is really helpful. I did go through it. It's pretty good. And of course, as a BA, you're going to have to validate and verify, which is in chapter 7.2 and 3 of your PABOK. Then I asked it to create functional requirements based on the acceptance criteria. And here it has created a link to which acceptance criteria and which functional requirements have been created to change the brand of Supreme Coffee. So again, we had context. And then I asked it, so it was really good. These are the functional requirements based on the user story, traceable to the user story. And here's the set of functional requirements, which is really good. And then I asked it to create non-functional requirements based on the acceptance criteria, which it did. And again, you can see the traceability to the acceptance criteria. I didn't like that it only spoke about systems, so I told it to improve the non-functional requirements, which it did. So I really like that. Then I asked it to create transitional requirements. Just want to say we are less than 2 minutes in. And there's the transitional requirements. Now, I've taken the requirements container, the data set or the books that we've got from our library, and I've said, create an additional, okay, I first did that. Let me just skip past that. So I thought, how many user stories can I get? And you can get about 150 to 200 user stories from one batch of data pooling, which I thought was really helpful. So you would do this, the acceptance criteria and all of that for every single user story. And I do suggest with AI, you try break down the data, because when you ask it to do too much, it can only handle so much. And it depends what kind of AI you're using. If you're using ChatGPT 4 versus 3.5, or using Anthropic or Claude or 2 or whatever you're using, they all have data limits. They can only give you so much information, and then they start hallucinating and, going a bit nuts. So you want to almost break that data down and work with it, which is what our containers do. And so it's created now another 20, which I thought was super helpful. So we have 40 user stories that are unique, that are atomic, that are concise. And now I've asked it to create a value stream, which is a concept we use in business architecture, which is like a process, not a process, but like a process. What are the steps that we need to cross-map this user story to? Well, so firstly, we're going to create the value stream. So we want to change our brand, and we're using our requirements high level. And it's saying, well, it's waiting and still waiting, because it's obviously processing and thinking. But I'm sure we can handle the 20 seconds. Pause for a second. So the value stream, it's going to, what we want to do is deliver a consistent brand experience. Let's say that's the process we want to design. These are the stakeholders that would have to be involved in that. And then these are the stages. You'd have to develop the brand strategy. You'd have to create brand guidelines. You'd have to educate staff. You'd have to enforce brand compliance. And then these would be the outcomes you need. And these would be the capabilities that the business would have to have. Now, I do want to add that PABOK doesn't visualize capabilities correctly. So do not use capabilities in PABOK. If you want to know, I've got a whole thing on capabilities. You can go to my website. But the definition of capabilities in PABOK is correct, but the way it's been designed is incorrect. Don't tell them. I don't want to get into trouble. So when we look to cross-map the user stories now, we want to take a set of user stories that the bot created from the requirements high level and say, to be able to achieve these things, what would the requirements be? And now we're talking about user story requirements. And I know some things are agile, they're not agile, and blah, blah, blah. But I like user stories because it's a set of information that you get in from your database. So if you choose something else, like, I don't know, just the traditional requirement set, kudos, go for that. So now it's saying, when I develop a brand strategy, these are the user stories associated with it. When I create brand guidelines, these are the user stories. I will slow it down. When I monitor brand consistency and perception, these would be the user stories I would use as a marketing executive, blah, blah, blah. And because I've asked it quite a broad set, it would have been even more, would have been better if we actually had a, not so much a broad set like I've done here, but for each stage, I asked it for user stories because like I said, it has a difficulty doing too much information depending on the type of bot. So I do use Claude 2 through Poe, which is got the highest amount of tokens, and tokens means the data that it will feed in and out. So what you instruct it to do, what you send to it is called a data set, and what it sends back is another data set, and it has a limit of how much. So as an example, 3.5 allows, I think it's 8K. It could be 16. No, I think 16 sets of data. The one I'm using has 100K sets of data. So you can imagine the bot is performing better in terms of the amounts of data it can process at a time. So now we've got in each stage of our project some user stories. You'll have to redo this. I didn't feel like making it perfect, but you get the gist of it. So now I said, how long will it take to deliver these steps, right? So these different stages. And I want you to estimate how many people would be involved to do this. So how many man hours or woman hours, whatever you want to call it, people hours, would be required to do this initiative. And the bot that I'm using has been trained to understand when I shorten words, but if you're using a generic, you should write a good case of what you're asking for. And you might have to do a couple of different chats at a time, so that because every time you start a new chat, you start with a fresh data set, which is not good, but you also get to do more data. So now what it's done is it's estimated, okay, if there were 10 key stakeholders, so think of stakeholder analysis that you do in chapter 4 of your BABA guide, and even before in 3.2, you are saying which are the stakeholders, and so considering the number of people, it would probably be 3 months. But if you had 20 stakeholders, it would be 9 months, and if you had 40 stakeholders, potentially a year to do. So in this case, I chose 10 stakeholders, and these 10 stakeholders, I've now asked it to provide an estimate of the tasks that would need to be performed in this, brand change that I'm doing for Supreme Copy. And so here it's come through and it has said, let's just look at the marketing team. The marketing team would need to assist with the brand strategy development. They would have to help create and distribute brand assets. They would participate in audits and monitoring, and they would provide customer insight for strategy improvement. And this is more or less the months that it would take. So super smart at that, but it understands our business a little bit better. And then the training team, the sales team, the quality assurance. So these would be the task allocation that we'd have. And then I asked her to create a roadmap for me on the 10 key stakeholders that would be impacted by our brand change. And it gave me a timeline and the phases that we'd be working in. And remember, I've already got some high-level requirements. So in the 8 minutes, we can go and get an estimate and we can analyze how long a project will take. And we can give the 3 options. You know, you can look at if we have 40 stakeholders versus 10 stakeholders and who will be involved. And you can go much further than what I have. But what I wanted to point out, I provided with a knowledge brief. Will happily help a knowledge base and a knowledge brief for the analyst to analyze. Yeah, do you have a question?
How much of it? I was trying to read along, and it's pretty good. It's not perfect, of course. It's not presentable to my team. How much of what you've done, of what you've seen, is ready to go versus needs like 10 or 20% nuance cleanup before presenting it to anybody? So
You have to clean it. You have to.
there's always cleaning, always.
Yeah. The biggest issue is the data that you feed it, right?
Yeah.
So it's like bringing in a consultant and going, create requirements for me, right? The consultant will try based on its knowledge, and it will, you know, it or he, she will, you know, try provide some insight, but the consultant really needs to understand context.
So
AI is exactly the same. So first thing is the knowledge that you provide. And then secondly, depending on how much information is got to process continually, is going to mean that it sometimes makes mistakes, just like a consultant.
Just like wow, because a human fed it and created it, so it's going to make human mistakes sometimes because it's programmed by a human.
Yeah,
I appreciate that. Okay, cool, thanks.
Does that answer your question? Okay, all right, good. So that's AI. Anyone have questions before I kind of move on to the closing area of what we discussed?
Yes, ma'am. So the question essentially is that can you essentially take the PO to do business architecture, requirement gathering, value stream mapping, and break down a set of requirements from UML diagramming as well with ChatGPT?
Oh, yeah. You can do UML. It's not really good at diagrams and tables. So your first step would probably be to make a document. Oh, back to documents. Hell. Because it's language, right? It's understanding words. So you have to explain things in a specific way. The answer is AI has grown so fast since I started doing full testing 9-10 months ago. You can do visualizations now using instructions and all of that in ChatGPT 4, for instance. And it can actually analyze your picture. You can send a picture to ChatGPT 4 and it can write the document for you. So you can do it that way, I suppose. You have to check it. But now you can go back to writing things on a piece of paper and uploading it to GPT-4 and say, now write it. So I've always said to people, you know, when you're doing requirements as an instance, okay, so I don't know. Let's first figure out if that answers your question.
Mm-hmm. It basically, so you can like using like Poe. Who is Poe?
Oh no, it's like GPT, ChatGPT.
Oh,
yeah.
Oh, that was cool.
Yeah.
And so
There's
can
a few of them. There's like Anthropic. There's one that I really like, which is Perplexity. Took a minute. So there's actually lots of different types of bots. I just like Poe from a user experience point of view, but I do find in some instances ChatGPT-4 is still the best evolving bot. It all uses the same OpenAI, but the way that it teaches it and structures it is slightly different between the options. You can get it in Azure and various other areas as well.
But has the large language model evolved to write like functional requirements really well, like usability, retention history, something like that? Has it has it evolved to write core functional requirements that basically you would say, define the user stories, run the Scrum meetings for me, right? And then so essentially what you're doing is structuring like a requirement walkthrough, and the requirement walkthrough has these requirements, and then you say, okay, basically traceability is done, all this is done. So can we do that using
Yes, with
uh,
this condition, right?
yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Again,
So
you need to have your context, so you need your architecture to do it because it needs to understand what you're doing. Secondly, you need to train the bots. People forget that you actually have to train the bot to do specific functions for you. So that involves that. Then you've got integration between your knowledge base and your function of the bot. So there's some complexity in what you're requesting. Can it do it? Yes. Is everyone ready for it? No. And you can gate it. So you can put it into your own platforms, and that helps with maintaining your data, your knowledge base. But yes, it can. And if this leads to the question of the job, what I like to say is that those boring documents and stuff that you used to do are going to come in handy to get your bot to do stuff for you, and you can automate some things. And this is what I've said in all of the sessions I've had with BAs. Your job will change. Don't think it's going to be different, but you have to validate and verify all the information. So you got to go back to being an analyst. So I don't see AI changing your job or taking over your job anytime soon. It is evolving super fast, so don't hold me to it. But right now, there's, after extensive work with us, there's no ways it's at that level yet. However, your understanding of how to use AI has to evolve. You have to learn how to use it, because if you don't know how to use it, you're going to work in organizations and have no concept of how to do prompt engineering and things differently. So you have new skills you have to acquire, and your job will be easier, but yeah.
that sounds
Sorry, Teha, but let's kind of keep moving. Summer, did you have something before we keep
absolutely
moving?
yes, that was good. Thank you so much. That was just a brief question. Sorry for taking too much
No,
time.
you're great. You're great. Yeah.
No worries.
Summer, did you have something before we move on?
Yeah, you kind of mentioned it. You said, like, you have to, well, I guess I don't know anything about any of the bots at all or how they work. I haven't played around with them. Like, where do you start? Yours seem to know kind of what you were looking for. I think it's, yours has been trained. Maybe that document that you provided at the beginning of that video had something to do with it. So, like, what are the things that need to happen before that?
Well, I'm a geek. So when new tech comes out, I'm like, yay. And then I just play with it. And so I probably spent too much time trying to learn this, but for me, with that kind of entrepreneurial spirit, I just try and see if it works. So, and that's what I suggest for everybody. This isn't a scary thing. You can start with simple stuff. Go log on to ChatGPT and say, what has the weather pattern been in my hometown over the last 2 years or 3 years or whatever it might be. There's some data limits, but and start seeing how you do things. There's lots of videos coming out. There's lots of ways, but just have a play. That's the first start, so that you're not completely ignorant into some of these things. And you'll find you go down that rabbit hole where you want to know more and you want to see how you can use it better. And I will show you now, there's some bots that are completely free that you can use, that we've created, that you can play with as well.
Great,
So,
thanks.
all right. Oops, I missed that. So just in summary, business analysts, business architects, your AI companion bot, your baby like mine, is fetching data, converting it into information, i.e., data sets, and then providing knowledge. Obviously, AI is not going to do that. You're going to have to do that, provide knowledge, insights into a particular situation, so that your sponsors and your project managers and everyone can make good decisions. And that's really what you're doing. You're not going to get all information all the time. That's what we term agile. You're going to give them better information than they got last week, and you're going to make it quicker. So as BAs, we have to understand that we don't always do absolute things. In other words, we have to make assumptions. And so we're going to use the data that we have to make really good assumptions, because you're asking it for more detail to make those assumptions. Because if you're working in a future state, nobody really knows. I mean, when an architect designs your house, she has to make lots of assumptions around, how it's all going to turn out. And anyone who's watched Reno shows, like I do, knows that things never quite go according to plan. But you have to make those to start a project. All right, so when we look at the 10 things that business analysts do, this is what Deirdre's version of life is. You look to do a background, you look to understand the problem in the business, you look to the critical success factors or measures, root cause, stakeholders, current state, business requirements, down to solution requirements, the future state diagrams, usually processes, etc., any cost to benefit, and the next steps or recommendations. And AI can help you build all of this. And if you have architecture and knowledge base or architecture, you can get even better insight out of this. So if you just focus on doing a couple of the initial steps, you can certainly get that done sooner than later. Just a reminder, business requirements. We have business requirements, user stories or user requirements or stakeholder requirements, solution requirements, which include functional and non-functional and transitional requirements. So you have to be very explicit when you talk to AI, and you don't want to say things like, create requirements for me, because it will just make assumptions on what that means. Educated, but you want to be more specific. So Babok has a lot of terms. You should be using the actual terms. And I know when I train, a lot of people go, the words are so boring, and they're not exciting, and la la la. And you use words like elicitation and things like that. But remember, AI is a language. It is looking at words and making decisions from that. So you should understand the language that you're working in. Okay, what AI cannot do is it really can't understand the level of complexity that we're dealing with yet. And things like understanding what's more important than the other. It's working on it, and it has improved tremendously since I started. So it's led to inconsistencies, building a table. So if you want to kind of relate requirements to each other, and you say this requirement, and you provide a definition, and then you have the acceptance criteria, and then you have the functional, non-functional. And so if you build tables like that, it starts hallucinating and getting a little bit confused. It's really good at doing lists. So if you do lists, it's okay. But you ask it to build tables, and yeah, it goes. I had to maintain my sanity by walking away several times. AI repeats certain mistakes, so you correct it, it does it right another 2 times, and then it goes back and repeats it. As I said, the more data it's processing, the more it kind of takes shortcuts. And so you have to be aware of that. And like I said, as table complexity increases, so the more columns that you have or the more rows that you have, it degrades and it starts giving you half information. And then it can tell you off as well. Like, I've given you enough, you should know. It actually, the one time it's told me several things, but one time it said to me, you get the gist of it. And I'm like, I don't want the gist. I want the actual data. Oh, so I had to start a whole nother chat because it started to degrade really badly. What it's really good at and what it will continue to excel at is time. You cannot believe how quick it is. For those who've done workshops and stakeholder engagements and interviews and all those lovely things, by the way, just record interviews and record workshops and pop it into AI. Think about it. And you know, it does everything for you. It's fantastic.
If I may, as I was setting up tonight, I just updated my Zoom app over the last week, and now there's an AI companion in Zoom that you can turn on, and it'll summarize as it observes and everything. I was like, I won't try it today, but I'll try someday.
There is so much happening. Obviously, you know, if you do that, you have to say to people, I'm going to gather the transcript and the summary. No, but I mean, we know this, but why not? Do you know what I mean? Like, it saves so much time. So BAs, if you are interviewing people, just tell them you're going to record it. You're going to delete the file afterwards, but you're using it to capture the requirements. And then you don't have to sit there and take 20,000 notes and manage product. You actually can just facilitate the session. A deep understanding of business architecture principles is necessary to monitor and manage the process. And then you will get optimal results because it understands the particular context. So while AI like ChatGPT can serve as a valuable tool, business architects or analysts are far from being replaced. There's still a lot. So all that's going to happen is take some of that pain away from you right now and let you provide information to businesses much faster. Which is where things really add up and cost money. So I always say, try get a prototype to your stakeholders, have a session based on that prototype, rather than trying to get information from them first. Give them a starter for 10. And based on that starter for 10, you're now having more robust discussions than you have had before. So you want to meet our new free learner bots? We've got these are some of my babies. I've got several of them. So those doing ECBA, CCBA, and CBAP, these have been customized to help you with your learning, completely free. You have one of two options, right? You can either sign up for a more advanced model, which you have to pay for. It's not coming to me. Or you choose the standard GPT 3.5, which is completely free. So we've designed it in our team for you. You have to go to our website. You have to sign in. You have to do that. And please give us feedback on how the bot's performing. And of course, you have to cross-check everything with the Babok guide. So you can upload the free material that we have. So even if you're not in the course, you can upload it. And you can feed it into the bots to ask specific questions. So we've tried to get people testing and using it and all of that. I do have a seat left for mastering business architecture, which is going to be strategy through to requirements using architecture. Some of the discussion we made, that's in November and that's live. And then we have some other courses as well. So please do have a look. Yeah.
Are this US time or New Zealand time?
Are
this live meeting?
It's going to be early in our morning, and you guys will be in out of daylight savings. So it'll be Your time about 2 p.m.
Oh, that's not bad.
And it's only going to be a 4-hour session because there's too much to deal with. But at least there's a nice large group of, I've kept it small, but there's a diverse group of people who either transitioning into architecture or are architects wanting to understand the requirements and the knowledge base a bit better. So that is an option. Won't last long. But I'm super excited about that because we're bringing in AI now more robustly, and we're customizing our bot. It's going to be in beta, but we're hopefully going to release that towards the end of the year, early next year, where people can run the entire process with less stress. But I do encourage you, from your IIBA and your BABOK, and you want to learn from it. I think they're pretty good. The free ones, yeah, you're going to get what the bot's going to give you. But for the other ones, and they are structured differently. So in other words, it's going to be simpler if you do an ECBA because it's not as complex as CBAP, for instance. And like I said, please join us and please share back because I'm doing this for free, but I would like some feedback. And you can do that via LinkedIn or via the email or via Brad or Lara or any of my team members. You can send some feedback. So please share back. Is what I'm saying.
If you have a LinkedIn post that promotes it, I can repost it in the IIBA LinkedIn group.
Good. I think
happy
maybe
to do that.
end of this month, yeah, we'll do some for BA Day. Maybe that's actually a good idea.
Okay, and I'll post it out. Yeah.
Okay, perfect. Okay, so that's me for today. I hope you found it super helpful. If not, keep quiet. I'm joking. But yeah, this is a very exciting space. It will change your job. You won't lose it, but it will change it. And
Absolutely.
you need to understand how that information is going to work. And believe me, you'll be much happier for it.
I gotta say, yeah, I'm a late adopter. I was telling everyone beforehand, and it's intimidating, but I think I need to start asking it questions. That's all. Like you said, I could ask it a question and see what happens. Quick, something already in the data, not that I have to load and set the data. So,
yes, exactly.
and the almanac. I'll start with the almanac. All right. Okay, so we're at time. Does anybody? I have closing remarks, and then we'll go. But does anybody have a last question? All right, if you think of it after the fact, we can reach out to Deirdre and make that happen. When you register for these events on the IIBA sites, if you give an email, then I can do things like send you reminders. So hopefully everyone got a reminder today to come back, but not everyone gives their email during checkout. So I can't do anything about that. But if you give your email, I can also send out the slides. Are you going to send me the PDF of the slides? Right. And I can send that. If you gave your email, then I can give you back stuff. But not everyone's done that. So give me send me an email at president@iibadc if you need to, .org. What else? Our next meeting is November 15th. I will get that posted in the next week to all the sites, the global site and our site and meetup, and you can find out more information there. What else? Oh, I can stop recording and just say thank you. Thank you, Deirdre. This has been wonderful. I can't say enough. This is very special, and thank you for spending time with us today.
Yeah, you're most welcome, and thanks for being so hospitable and for all the organization. Yeah. And so happy playing, everybody.
Okay, I'll stop recording.